My name is Margaret Sullivan, and at 78, I thought I knew what loneliness felt like. But nothing prepared me for that Thanksgiving dinner in 2023, sitting at my daughter Sarah's pristine dining table in suburban Connecticut, watching my family discuss my future like I wasn't even there. The house itself was a monument to Sarah's success, a sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured lawns that screamed upper middle class. Every surface gleamed with expensive polish, from the mahogany dining table that could seat 12 to the crystal chandelier that cast rainbow patterns across the cream-colored walls. Yet despite all this luxury, the atmosphere felt colder than the November wind rattling the windows. "Mom's getting worse," Sarah whispered to her brother David, as if my hearing had failed along with my mobility. "She can barely walk to the mailbox anymore." Last week, Mrs. Henderson from next door called to say she found Mom sitting on her front steps, confused about which apartment was hers. I wanted to interrupt, to explain that I'd simply been tired after my physical therapy session, but the words stuck in my throat like dry turkey. The incident had been embarrassing enough without having it dissected at the dinner table. "We can't keep paying for that expensive assisted living place," David replied, cutting his turkey with surgical precision. His movements were mechanical, efficient, the same way he'd approached everything since childhood. "It's draining her savings, and frankly, we have our own families to think about. Emma's college tuition is killing us, and Sarah's youngest just started private school." I gripped my walker tighter, feeling the familiar ache in my arthritic hands. The assisted living facility they referenced cost $4,200 a month. Money that came from my own savings, accumulated through decades of frugal living and careful investment of my late husband's life insurance policy. After raising 2 children, as a single mother, following Robert's sudden heart attack when they were teenagers, working double shifts as a seamstress at Hartford Textiles to put them through college, this was my reward, being treated like a financial liability. "What about hiring a live-in nurse?" Sarah's husband suggested, looking up from his phone where he'd been checking stock prices throughout dinner. "Might be cheaper in the long run." "With what money?" Sarah snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Mom's pension barely covers her medications. Do you know how much her heart pills cost? And don't get me started on the physical therapy sessions." The conversation continued around me as if I were a piece of furniture being evaluated for disposal. They discussed my medical conditions, my financial situation, my daily struggles with tasks that had once been simple. David mentioned how inconvenient it was to drive 45 minutes from his home in West Hartford whenever I had a medical emergency. Sarah complained about having to take time off work to accompany me to doctor's appointments. That's when my granddaughter Emma, barely 22 and home from her expensive liberal arts college, looked up from her phone with cold eyes that mirrored her mother's. Her perfectly straightened blonde hair caught the chandelier light as she delivered her verdict with the casual cruelty that only youth can muster. "We're not your caretakers, Grandma. You need to figure this out yourself. I mean, you're an adult, right? You figured out how to raise kids and work and everything when Grandpa died. This shouldn't be that different." The words hit me like a physical blow, each syllable landing with the force of betrayal. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Sarah's grandfather clock. Ironically, the same clock I'd given her when she bought this house, a family heirloom that had belonged to my own grandmother. I'd passed it down with such hope, believing it would symbolize the continuity of our family bonds. I excused myself, claiming fatigue, but really, I needed to escape the suffocating weight of their indifference. The bathroom mirror reflected a stranger, a frail woman with silver hair and defeated eyes, wearing a cardigan I'd knitted myself back when my fingers were steady enough for such tasks. Back in my small apartment that night, surrounded by photographs of happier times when my children still needed me, I made a decision that would change everything. The pictures told the story of a different family, Sarah graduating from college, David's wedding, Emma's high school graduation. In every photo, I was there, smiling proudly, the devoted mother and grandmother. When had their gratitude transformed into resentment? I called my lawyer the next morning and scheduled an appointment that would shock my family more than they could ever imagine. Hey there. I'm curious, where are you watching this story from? Drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button because this story is just getting started and you won't want to miss what happens next. 3 weeks after that devastating Thanksgiving, I met the person who would restore my faith in humanity. Her name was Maria Santos, a night shift nurse at Hartford General Hospital, where I'd been admitted after a bad fall in my bathroom that left me with a bruised hip and wounded pride. The hospital at night was a different world from the bustling, daytime chaos. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in an ethereal blue-white glow. The corridors echoed with the soft squeaking of wheelchair wheels and the distant beeping of monitoring equipment. Most staff moved with efficient purpose, their faces masks of professional concentration. But Maria was different from the moment she walked into my room. It was 2 a.m. when I woke up in pain, my hip throbbing from the impact against my bathroom tiles. The fall had happened so suddenly. One moment I was reaching for my toothbrush, the next I was on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling and wondering how long it would take someone to find me. My emergency alert system had worked, thank God, but the paramedics' pitying expressions had been almost as painful as my injuries. Most nurses would have just administered pain medication and moved on to their next patient. But Maria pulled up, the uncomfortable plastic chair beside my bed, and settled in as if she had all the time in the world. "Mrs. Sullivan, you look worried," she said in accented English, her voice warm like hot chocolate on a winter morning. "Is it just the pain, or is there something else troubling you tonight?" Her face was kind, with gentle brown eyes that crinkled. At the corners and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore purple scrubs decorated with tiny butterflies, and a small silver cross hung from a chain around her neck. Everything about her radiated competence mixed with genuine warmth. I found myself telling her everything about my family's coldness, about feeling invisible in my own life, about the crushing loneliness that had become my constant companion since Robert died 15 years ago. I told her about the Thanksgiving dinner, about Emma's cruel words, about feeling like a burden to the people I'd sacrificed everything to raise. The words poured out like water from a broken dam. Maria listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or offering a gentle, "I understand," in her soft voice. She didn't try to fix everything or offer platitudes about how family always comes around. She simply witnessed my pain with the kind of presence that made me feel human again. "You know," she said after I finished, adjusting my blanket with practiced care, "in my country, El Salvador, we have a saying, la familia que eliges es a veces más fuerte que la familia con la que naces. The family you choose is sometimes stronger than the family you're born into." She told me about her own journey, fleeing violence in El Salvador with her 3 young children, working as a hotel housekeeper while studying English at night, cleaning offices until she saved enough money for nursing school. Her husband had been killed in the Civil War, and she'd made the agonizing decision to leave everything behind for her children's safety. "I understand feeling abandoned by family," she said quietly. "When I first came here, my own brothers and sisters in El Salvador stopped talking to me. They said I was betraying our homeland, that I thought I was too good for them now. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are the ones who hurt us most, because they think that love gives them permission to take us for granted." Over the next 5 days of my hospital stay, Maria became my lifeline. She brought me extra blankets when the night got cold, shared stories about her children, Carlos, who was now an engineer, Sophia, studying to be a teacher, and little Anna, who wanted to be a doctor like the ones who had helped Maria navigate the American healthcare system. Most importantly, she treated me like a human being worth caring about, not a medical problem to be solved. When I was discharged, I hugged Maria goodbye, breathing in her scent of lavender hand lotion and hospital soap, knowing I'd probably never see her again. But fate had other plans. That evening, as I struggled with my new medication schedule, a confusing array of pills that needed to be taken at different times with or without food, there was a knock at my door. It was Maria, still in her scrubs from her day shift at another facility, holding a small notepad and wearing that same gentle smile. "I was passing by," she said, though I knew the hospital was nowhere near my apartment complex, "and thought you might need help organizing these pills. Hospital discharge instructions can be confusing, and I don't want you to accidentally take the wrong thing." That night, as she sat at my kitchen table creating a detailed medication chart with different colored pens, I made another call to my lawyer. My will was about to undergo a radical transformation. For the next 6 months, Maria became the daughter I'd always wished for. She visited twice a week, never accepting payment despite my insistence, and each visit felt like a gift. She helped me organize my medications in a 7-day pill dispenser, accompanied me to doctor's appointments when my children couldn't be bothered, and most importantly, she listened to my stories about the old days when Hartford was a different place. "You remind me of my own grandmother, Abuela Carmen," she told me one evening as we sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The air carried the scent of Mrs. Chen's jasmine garden from the apartment below, and somewhere in the distance, children were playing in the courtyard. She raised me when my parents couldn't. My father worked construction jobs that took him away for months, and my mother, she struggled with sadness after my baby brother died. Abuela always said that kindness is the only currency that multiplies when you spend it. I learned about Maria's life in rich detail, how she'd fled El Salvador's brutal civil war with her children, sleeping in churches and shelters along the dangerous journey north. She'd worked 3 jobs when she first arrived, cleaning offices from midnight to 6 a.m., watching children for busy mothers during the day, and taking English classes at night. It had taken her 8 years to save enough money and improve her English sufficiently to enter nursing school, all while raising 3 children as a single mother. The hardest part wasn't the work, she confided during one of our evening conversations. It was the loneliness. In El Salvador, I had my sisters, my cousins, my neighbors. Here, I was invisible. People looked through me like I didn't exist. The only time anyone noticed me was to complain that I'd missed a spot while cleaning, or to remind me not to speak Spanish in front of their children. Despite her struggles, she never complained, never asked for anything. Her generosity made my family's behavior even more shameful by comparison. While Maria spent her precious free time making sure I took my medications correctly and helping me navigate the confusing maze of Medicare billing, my own children treated me like an inconvenience. Meanwhile, my relationship with Sarah and David deteriorated further. They visited less frequently, and when they did, it was always with an agenda: selling my apartment to move me to a cheaper facility, questioning my spending, or lecturing me about being more realistic about my limitations. "Mom, we noticed you've been ordering groceries for 2 people, Sarah confronted me during one particularly tense visit in March. She'd been going through my kitchen cabinets like a detective, noting the presence of foods I didn't usually eat: plantains, black beans, fresh cilantro. "Are you being scammed by someone? There are people who target elderly women, you know." "I'm sharing meals with a friend," I replied simply, watching her face for any sign of happiness that I'd found companionship. Instead, her expression hardened with suspicion. "What friend?" "You don't have friends," David said with characteristic bluntness, not bothering to look up from his phone where he was checking emails. "You've been isolated for years. It's probably some scammer who's figured out you're vulnerable." That comment stung more than he realized. They were right. I didn't have friends. My old sewing circle had disbanded years ago when arthritis made it impossible for most of us to continue. My neighbors were polite but distant. I had Maria, but to them, a working-class immigrant nurse couldn't possibly be a real friend to their mother. The very idea that someone might genuinely care about me without an ulterior motive seemed impossible to them. "We think you should consider moving to Sunshine Manor," Sarah continued, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she used with her teenage children. "It's more affordable, and you'd have built-in companionship with other residents." I'd visited Sunshine Manor once, and the memory still haunted me. The overwhelmed staff, the smell of industrial disinfectant trying to mask other odors, the residents lined up in wheelchairs along the hallway like forgotten furniture, staring at nothing. With empty eyes. The activities consisted of bingo games where half the participants had fallen asleep, and television programs turned up so loud they could be heard 3 rooms away. One evening in March, as Maria helped me with my physical therapy exercises, gentle stretches to maintain what mobility I had left, I made my confession. "Maria, I need to tell you something. I've changed my will." She stopped mid-motion, concern flooding her face as she helped me lower my arm. "Mrs. Sullivan, I hope I haven't given you the wrong impression. I don't help you expecting anything in return. Your friendship is payment enough." "I know," I said, taking her calloused hands in mine, feeling the strength that came from years of hard work. "That's exactly why I did it." The spring of 2024 brought unexpected challenges that tested both our resolve and deepened our bond. My health was declining rapidly. What started as occasional dizzy spells became frequent falls, each one more frightening than the last. My body seemed to be betraying me in new ways daily. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold a coffee cup. My balance was so poor that even my walker felt inadequate, and my memory had moments of unsettling blankness that scared me more than, I admitted. Maria insisted on staying overnight more often, sleeping on my uncomfortable couch, despite having to work 12-hour shifts the next day. I protested constantly, knowing how exhausted she already was, but she'd wave away my concerns. With that gentle smile, "Mrs. Sullivan, you stayed up countless nights when your children were sick, didn't you? This is no different. Besides," she'd add with a wink, "your couch is more comfortable than some of the places I've slept." The arrangement worked well until one particularly bad morning in April. I'd gotten up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, feeling steady enough that I didn't want to wake Maria by getting my walker from beside the couch. The next thing I remembered was lying on the cold bathroom tiles, staring at the ceiling fixture, with Maria kneeling beside me in her pajamas, her face pale with worry. "Mrs. Sullivan, can you hear me? Don't try to move yet. I'm going to check if anything is broken." Her nursing training kicked in immediately, her hands gentle but efficient as she examined me for injuries. "You have a bump on your head, and your shoulder is already starting to bruise. You need to call your children," she urged after helping me back to bed and applying an ice pack to my shoulder. "This is getting dangerous. What if I hadn't been here? What if you'd hit your head harder?" I called Sarah the next morning, explaining my situation with as much dignity as I could muster. Her response was predictably cold and practical. "Mom, we've told you before. We can't be running over there every time you have a little stumble. David and I both have jobs and responsibilities. Maybe it's time to seriously consider that nursing home we mentioned." The nursing home she referenced was Sunshine Manor, the state-funded facility that haunted my nightmares. During my visit there, I'd watched a woman in her 80s crying quietly in the corner of the common room, clutching a photo of people who never visited. The staff was overworked and understaffed, the food was institutional and tasteless, and the smell of despair seemed to seep from the very walls. "Besides," Sarah continued, her voice sharp with frustration, "you're being dramatic. People your age fall all the time. It's normal. You just need to be more careful." More careful. As if I'd chosen to have my balance fail, as if I'd decided to become frail and dependent. The casual dismissal of my fears felt like another small death. That night, Maria and I had a serious conversation about my future over dinner. She'd made pupusas, a traditional Salvadoran dish that had become one of my favorite comfort foods. The smell of mesa and cheese filled my small kitchen, and for a moment, I could almost pretend we were a normal family having a normal evening meal. "I have an idea," she said hesitantly, setting down her fork and looking directly at me. "My apartment. Lease is up next month. It's a tiny place, barely big enough for one person, and the landlord is raising the rent again. My kids are grown now. Carlos has his own place. Sophia is sharing an apartment with roommates, and Anna is living in the dorms. I work mostly nights anyway. Maybe you'd consider letting me move in here. I could take proper care of you, and you wouldn't have to worry about being alone when these episodes happen. I was overwhelmed by her offer, but I had a better proposal. Maria, I want you to move in here, but not as my caretaker, as my family. This apartment will be yours anyway, and this way, you won't have to pay rent while you save money for nursing school. She'd mentioned her dream of becoming a registered nurse multiple times, explaining how the additional education would allow her to provide better care and earn enough to finally achieve financial stability. But the costs seemed insurmountable on her current salary. Between tuition, books, and the reduced work hours required for clinical rotations, the financial mathematics simply didn't work. I can't accept that, she protested, her eyes filling with tears. It's too much. What would people think? Your children already suspicious of me. You've already given me too much, I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. You've given me back my dignity, my purpose, and most importantly, hope that there are still good people in this world. Let me give you something back. As summer approached, my health continued to deteriorate, but my spirit soared. I finally had a real family again, one built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring content. You won't believe what happens when Margaret's family discovers her decision. By September 2024, I was spending most days in bed, but I was happier than I'd been in years. Maria had officially moved in, transforming my sterile apartment into a warm home filled with the scents of her traditional Salvadoran cooking and the sounds of her laughter during video calls with her children. The walls, once echoing with loneliness, now resonated with life. Maria singing softly while she cleaned, the gentle bubbling of beans cooking on the stove, and the comforting sound of someone who cared about me moving through the space we now shared. She'd also enrolled in RN classes at the local community college, studying late into the night at my kitchen table after her shifts. I'd watch her from my bed, bent over thick textbooks, highlighter in hand, occasionally muttering medical terminology under her breath. Her dedication was inspiring. This woman who'd already overcome so much was reaching for even greater heights, driven by a desire to help others that seemed limitless. Pharmacology is killing me, she'd confess during our evening conversations, rubbing her tired eyes. I understand the practical application from years of working, but memorizing all these drug interactions and contraindications, sometimes I wonder if I'm too old to be doing this. Nonsense, I'd reply firmly. You're 45, not 95, and you have something those younger students don't have, real experience. You've seen how medications actually affect patients, not just how they're supposed to work according to textbooks. Watching her pursue her dreams gave me purpose. I was finally able to help someone who truly deserved it. I insisted on paying for her textbooks and supplies, and when she protested, I reminded her that I'd gladly spent thousands on my grandchildren's education without hesitation. This felt more meaningful than any tuition check I'd ever written. My lawyer, Robert Chen, visited regularly to ensure my affairs were in order. A meticulous man in his 60s who'd been handling my legal matters for over a decade, he understood the complexity of family dynamics better than most. During his last visit, he delivered news that would set everything in motion. Margaret, I need to discuss something important with you, he said, settling into the chair beside my bed with his ever-present briefcase. Your daughter Sarah has been calling my office repeatedly, trying to get information about your will and financial status. She's claiming you might have dementia and are being manipulated by someone living in your home. I wasn't surprised. Sarah had always been manipulative when money was involved, a trait that had become more pronounced as her own expenses grew. Emma's college costs, her youngest son's private school tuition, the mortgage on that impressive house in the suburbs. What exactly has she been saying? She's suggesting that Maria has isolated you from your family and convinced you to change your will under duress. She's even hinted about pursuing guardianship proceedings if she believes you're not competent to make your own decisions. The irony was bitter. Sarah, who hadn't spent a full day with me in years, claiming that someone was isolating me from family. Maria, who encouraged me to call my children regularly and always made herself scarce when they visited, was apparently the manipulator. Robert, I want you to arrange something. Schedule a family meeting for next week. Tell them it's about my estate planning and that it's urgent. I think it's time to clear the air. Are you sure you're ready for this? He asked, concern evident in his voice. This kind of confrontation can be emotionally devastating, especially given your current health status. I've been ready for months. I'm tired of pretending that their behavior is acceptable. I'm tired of making excuses for their absence. And I'm tired of feeling guilty for finding real love and care with someone who isn't related to me by blood. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Sarah, David, and even Emma showed up promptly, clearly expecting to hear about their inheritance. They barely acknowledged Maria, who sat quietly in the corner at my request, though I noticed their eyes following her movements with barely concealed hostility. Thank you all for coming, Robert began, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Sullivan wanted to discuss her final wishes with the family present. She felt it was important for everyone to understand her decisions while she's still able to explain her reasoning. Sarah leaned forward eagerly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. We've been worried about Mom's decision-making lately. There have been some concerning signs that suggest she might not be thinking clearly. Such as? Robert inquired professionally, his pen poised over his legal pad. She's been giving money to strangers, letting random people live in her apartment, David added, shooting a pointed look at Maria that was meant to be subtle, but landed with the force of an accusation. She's always been trusting, but this is different. She's vulnerable right now. I see, Robert said, making notes. And you? Believe this indicates diminished capacity. Obviously, Sarah said, her voice gaining confidence. She's isolated from her real family. She's making financial decisions that don't make sense, and she's clearly being influenced by someone who has everything to gain from her generosity. Emma, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Grandma, we're just worried about you. This woman is taking advantage of your loneliness. That's when I decided to speak up, my voice stronger than it had been in months, fueled by righteous anger and crystal clear purpose. Actually, I've never been thinking more clearly in my life. I asked Robert to arrange this meeting because I wanted you to hear this directly from me, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months, each word carefully chosen and delivered, with the weight of absolute conviction. I'm leaving everything, my apartment, my savings, my investments, my jewelry, everything I own, to Maria Santos. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. I watched their faces change as the words sank in. Sarah's mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air, David's face flushing red with anger, and Emma's eyes widening with disbelief. You can't be serious, Sarah finally managed to say, her voice climbing toward hysteria. She's manipulated you. She's a complete stranger who saw a vulnerable old woman and decided to take advantage. This is elder abuse. A stranger? I laughed, though it hurt my chest and triggered a small coughing fit. Maria has been more of a family to me in 8 months than you've been in 8 years. She's here every day, caring for me, without expecting anything in return. When I fell in the bathroom at 3 a.m., she was the one who helped me. When I had chest pains last month, she was the one who drove me to the emergency room at midnight. Where were you? David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that made everyone wince. We'll contest this. You're clearly not competent to make these decisions. No rational person gives away nearly $1 million to their housekeeper. Housekeeper? Maria spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. I am a licensed practical nurse who has worked in healthcare for 12 years. I have never asked Mrs. Sullivan for anything except the privilege of caring for someone who reminds me of my own grandmother. Actually, Robert interjected calmly, his professional demeanor unchanged despite the chaos erupting around him. I've had Mrs. Sullivan evaluated by 2 independent psychiatrists as a precautionary measure. Dr. Williams from Hartford Hospital and Dr. Rodriguez from the University of Connecticut Medical Center both conducted thorough examinations. She's completely competent. Her decision is legally sound and thoroughly documented. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. I have medical evaluations, cognitive assessments, and detailed documentation of Mrs. Sullivan's reasoning for her decisions. She's also been recording video statements explaining her choices, made when she was feeling well and thinking clearly. Emma finally spoke up, her voice shrill with disbelief and barely contained rage. What about us? We're your real family. We're your blood. Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore? Real family? I met her eyes steadily, seeing in them the same coldness she'd inherited from her mother. Real family doesn't abandon their grandmother when she needs them most. Real family doesn't call someone a burden at Thanksgiving dinner. Real family doesn't treat visits like chores to be endured. Maria chose to love me when you chose to forget me. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustrated rage. This is insane. You're throwing away your children's inheritance for some woman you barely know. I know Maria better than I've known any of you in years, I replied. I know she sends half her paycheck to her elderly mother in El Salvador. I know she works double shifts to pay for her daughter's college textbooks. I know she cries when she watches the news about children being separated from their parents at the border because she remembers that fear. I know she stays up all night. When I'm sick, not because she has to, but because she can't bear the thought of me being afraid and alone. I paused, looking at each of their faces in turn. Can any of you tell me what I'm afraid of? Do you know what keeps me awake at night? Do you know what my favorite meal is now? Or what medication makes me nauseous? Or what time of day I feel strongest? Maria knows all of these things because she pays attention. She sees me as a person, not as an obligation or an inheritance. Maria had tears streaming down her face, but she remained silent, her hands folded in her lap. I knew this was overwhelming. For her, she'd grown up poor, and the idea of inheriting enough money to change her life forever was both thrilling and terrifying. Mrs. Sullivan, I never wanted your money, she said quietly. I want you to know that. Your friendship, your stories, your wisdom, these are the gifts you've given me. The money, it scares me. I know you didn't want my money, sweetheart. That's exactly why you deserve it. You'll use it to finish nursing school, to help other families like yours, to continue the kindness you've shown me. My children will use it to buy bigger houses and more expensive cars, but you'll use it to build a better world. As my children stormed out, making threats and accusations, David promising to contact elder abuse services, and Sarah vowing to contest the will in court, I felt lighter than I had in years. Their true nature had been revealed. When faced with the loss of money they'd never earned, they showed no concern for my happiness or well-being. Their anger wasn't about losing a mother. It was about losing an inheritance. 2 months later, I passed away peacefully in my sleep, with Maria holding my hand and soft music playing from the radio she'd placed on my nightstand. My last conscious memory was of her voice, reading me a letter from her daughter Anna, who was excelling in her pre-med courses and wanted to specialize in geriatrics to help elderly patients like me. The inheritance totaled $847,000, my life. Savings, the proceeds from Robert's life insurance policy, and the value of my apartment in Hartford's gentrifying downtown district. It was enough for Maria to finish her education, buy a house for her family, establish a scholarship fund for immigrant nursing students, and create the kind of security she'd never imagined possible. My children's legal challenge failed spectacularly. When security cameras from my building showed months of Maria's devoted care contrasted with their rare, obligatory visits. The video depositions I'd made with Robert told the complete story. A clear-minded woman choosing love over blood, kindness over convenience, and hope over resentment. 6 months after my death, Maria graduated at the top of her RN program. She now works at Hartford Hospital's geriatric unit, where she treats every patient with the same dignity and compassion she showed me. The Margaret Sullivan Scholarship Fund provides tuition assistance to immigrant nursing students, ensuring that my legacy of chosen family continues to grow. Sometimes justice comes quietly through the simple act of recognizing worth where others see only circumstance, choosing character over convenience, and understanding that family is defined not by shared DNA, but by shared love, respect, and commitment to each other's well-being. If this story moved you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced the power of chosen family? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.